Thank you.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. My name is Sonia Raja and I'll be your chairperson facilitating this very important and pertinent discussion on Islamophobia. I think the turnout tonight, we're expecting a few more people, so if you can come further to the front, that would be great. It's a very important issue, and I think the fact that we've got so many people here today reflects that in the times that we live in and the impact it's having in our communities. So with us today, we have Azad Ali from Muslim Engagement and Development, otherwise known as MEND. And Azad will be taking you through his lens, his expert lens, of the causes and cures for Islamophobia. For those social media lights amongst us, we do have a Twitter hashtag, #CCMendIslamophobia. See the pale words there? So people can follow the conversation online. Also just to note that we are filming, so we'll use that as a social experiment to see if that hinders the conversation or stifles it tonight. Okay, so before I hand over to Azad, I just wanted to take stock and think about the terminology around Islamophobia. I think we do live in an information age where we are bombarded with new terms, and as the Muslim community we really understand how that plays out. So it's a term that has started to get some attraction. As we know, language is very important. I think growing up, some of us, if not the majority of us, will have experienced racism in one shape or form. Yet Islamophobia for me is quite distinct in that it not only demonises your external appearance, the way you look, the colour of your skin, but it's an attack on the way you think, on your belief system, and the choices essentially that you make. And I don't know what's worse really. Is this now the age where these sorts of attacks are in actual fact encroaching on the way we are meant to believe, the freedom of thought? It can be argued that Islamophobia dates right back to the Crusades, but why is it now, in a generation of critical thinking, we find ourselves under a new wave of Islamophobia? A new manifestation of Islamophobia and the institutionalization of Islamophobia. So 2 decades ago, the Runnymede Trust report defined Islamophobia as an unfounded hostility towards Muslims and therefore fear or dislike of all or more Muslims. So Robert Richardson further regrets employing this term and outlined 8 problems with using Islamophobic as a descriptor of an anti-Islamic individual or activity. One of the problems that really stuck out to me was that he said, to label someone with whom you disagree as irrational or insane is to absolve yourself of the responsibility of trying to understand, both intellectually and with empathy, why they think and act the way they do, and of seeking through engagement and argument to modify their perceptions and understandings. For a community that makes up less than 5% of the UK population, we don't get half portrayed in the media. Can we really blame non-Muslims, or even Muslims, their phobia when all they see are Muslims, the Muslim other, as violent, non-tolerant fanatics? Another definition, which I quite like, by the Center for Race and Gender, Berkeley University, California, is Islamophobia is a contrived fear or prejudice fomented by the existing Eurocentric and Orientalist global power structure. It is directed at a perceived or real Muslim threat through the maintenance and extension of existing disparities in economic, political, social and cultural relations. while rationalising the necessity to deploy violence as a tool to achieve quote-unquote civilizational rehab of the target communities, Muslim or otherwise. Islamophobia reintroduces and reaffirms a global racial structure through which resource distribution disparities are maintained and extended. So, quite a broad topic, as you can see. Well, to help us to understand Islamophobia today, with a specific scope on the UK and the times modern day that we live in, we have Azad Ali from Muslim Engagement and Development. Azad is Head of Community Development and Engagement at MEND. He's been a community activist for over 20 years and has extensive experience working in the central government department in various roles. He is the chair of the Muslim Safety Forum and is one of the founding trustees of the Civil Service Islamic Society. Azad is a member of Liberty and formerly a member of its National Council. He's the Community Advisory Group and Home Office's Trust and Confidence Community Panel. He's a presenter on Muslim Communities Radio flagship show Easy Talk, and a presenter of Islam Channel's Your Views on the News. And on top of that, his name is Azad, which otherwise means freedom, right? So over to you.
I'm going to stand if that's okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I'm going to come to the front. I just feel a bit restricted behind this table. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I mean, that's a very long intro. I think the best intro I could give you is Azad Ali and then Google. You'll get everything about me. Most of it which isn't true. Okay, I think I don't want to mislead you. I'm not going to cover extensively Islamophobia itself, but more what I want to cover is its impact, and specifically from our point of view, MEND, what we think are perhaps the three major issues that we need to be dealing with, what we call causes. And then really look at, okay, what can we do about it? So it's a practical session in that sense, that it's action orientated, and by the end of it, you know, we need to kind of at least come to an understanding that there is something we need to do about it. You can challenge me if that's not the case, inshallah. So let's begin. And my clicker doesn't work. There you go. Oh, the laptop doesn't work now. Excuse me. Technical problems. Just a little thing, I'll get in trouble from my social media guy if I don't do this. If you're not following us on Twitter, please do follow us. Our handle is @MENDCommunity. And if you're on Facebook, do like our page. It's the same name, MEND Community, inshallah. And if you want to tweet about what's going on, what was the hashtag?
So it is CC MEND Islamophobia.
CC MEND Islamophobia, inshallah. Okay, so I think, you know, I've already seen some of you already in the audience. It's a very well educated and kind of well seasoned audience, I would say. So I'm not going to be able to teach you anything new. So some of this stuff isn't going to look new to you, but hopefully the angle I'm coming at it will be something new. Now, we all kind of see different headlines in the newspaper, particularly print media. And these are some of the recent ones that we've kind of just picked on. Talking about charities, talking about jihadis, how they're, like, you know, everywhere on our streets, chopping people's heads off and everything else. And the direct kind of link to that is that the oxygen it provides to the far right, in particular groups like the English Defence League and now what it's morphed to Britain First, underpinned by the British National Party, the usual kind of far right racists and neocons that are there. But it's kind of the level that is escalated from that is actually quite scary. The actual Islamophobic incidents that are taking place on the ground vary from, you know, just graffiti on a mosque door or a mosque wall, or someone being spat at, or someone's hijab being pulled, to gravestones being desecrated, to actually bombs exploding outside masjid. I don't know if any of you know which masjid that is. And finally, perhaps the highest and worst that it can get to is the terrorist murder of Muhammad Salim from Birmingham as he left a mosque after Esha Salah. So the range is actually all there. You know, everything that you can imagine that can happen following this kind of hatred, it is manifested itself. But I ask you this question: how many of you know about a central government policy that's dealing with that? And that has been one of our major kind of issues and concerns. So the reality is it is quite bad. And what we've kind of done is looked at, okay, figures, because we have to approach this, it's a very emotional subject. We have to approach this with some form of evidence. The Met Police have been recording Islamophobia from 2006, something which we at the Muslim Safety Forum initiated. And they were the only force to be recording for the last 6 years. It's only from 2012 other forces have started, and I'll come on to that. But as you can see, there is a year-on-year rise, and in particular, if you look at after the tragic incident of Woolwich, how the incidents kind of almost rose by 197% in June 2013 compared to 2012. There is a direct correlation there. And the picture isn't that great across the country. This is information that we gleaned from Freedom of Information requests. As you can see, the stats don't look that great. Interestingly, or conversely, the other interesting stats that we found is, for example, in Bedfordshire, there's only 4 Islamophobic incidents reported to the police force. Those of you who know Luton and that kind of area, there's just no way only 4 incidents took place in the space of 6 to 8 months in that area. So there is that apathy about reporting crime itself, which is an issue. So if we kind of say that Islamophobia is on the rise, we're not saying that as a kind of a sensationalist headline. We're basing it on evidence that we've been looking at, and we've been studying evidence, in particular police evidence a lot. We're not actually keen to follow NGO-based evidence because it can be disputed. So, and this is part of our work, which I'll come on to. But if you kind of look at some of these stats, this is from various studies, British social attitude studies and everything else. I just want to concentrate on 1 or 2. The first one is the 27% that you see there. 27% of 18 to 24-year-olds in this country, okay, disagree that Islam is a peaceful religion. So there's 27% of youngsters out there who think Islam is not peaceful. And 61% of Britons believe Islam is incompatible with British culture. Okay, so where is that education, do you think, is coming from?
Media.
It is. Primarily that media is coming from, but it's very worrying that a quarter of our fellow citizens, the youth, a quarter of them have this understanding, and then almost 3/4 believe Islam is incompatible with British culture. Where is the understanding of Islam, and where is the understanding of British culture? Who is feeding it? You know, for me to answer that question, I'd say, okay, well, what British culture am I talking about? Is it the pub culture? You know, what culture is it I'm talking about? So there is this almost scary thing that is happening, that there are a lot of conditioning taking place, and then there is others there which I'm going to skip. So to start the presentation, these are the 3 areas that I'd like to kind of focus on, and then look at what we can do. So the first one, biased media or irresponsible media reporting. This is an infographics of 2 studies, Cardiff University and Lancaster University. And the 21-to-1 ratio here is that for every one, if you like, positive or moderate story written about Muslims, there are 21 negative stories written about Muslims. And if you look at the adjectives that they would use, or the nouns, the number 1 noun is terrorist. 22% of the time that word is used every time a Muslim or Islam is discussed in a newspaper article. And you know, it's unsurprising because when you kind of look at the front pages of some of the newspapers that we've put together here, it is very scary. I mean, which one is worst? Which one do you think? Let's ask the intellectual audience here. Which one is the worst one there?
Mail.
Say the headline. Quite a few are from the Mail.
Just go for last.
Uh-huh.
The worst one.
But actually, it's a trick question because they're all bad. But just to understand, Muslim plot to kill the Pope is a made-up story. There was never a plot to kill the Pope. We complain, other people complain. They apologize, but where was the apology? It's with the Greyhound results, exactly. Right? So no one knows where the apology is. And this is part of the problem. But, you know, hey, look at these Muslims, look at these extremists, look at these people. They're even threatening Coronation Street. Right? This great institution here, Al-Qaeda Cori threat. Do you see? So it's kind of, they're trying to normalize it and permeate it through every aspect of our society, at every level, every class, to say, look how Islam is a threat. Look how Muslims are a threat. So every single one of those headlines are, you know, really, really damaging, because you've got to remember, most people just read the headlines. They don't really read the small text. But here is a more interesting finding, if you like, from the Lancaster University study. For every one moderate Muslim mentioned, 21 examples of extremist Muslims are mentioned in the British press. It is also interesting to note that the so-called moderate Muslims often got praised in a way which implies they are good because they aren't fully Muslim. Now, if I said that to you, you say, yeah, of course, Azad, you're going to say that. Right? But this is not me saying it. This is an academic study done by Lancaster University. They looked at over 200,000 articles, something like 40 odd million words they kind of studied. And this is what they found. This is their finding. That even the positive story that is there is only positive because the Muslim that they're talking about isn't really Muslim. Meaning they're not really what we would understand as fundamentals of the religion. They're not really affiliated to them or openly displaying them, if you like. So that's a very scary thought, and that's where we're starting from. And so the media, in our kind of eyes, is, you know, responsible for a lot of the things that we have, but it's not really the main one. The second area I'd like to kind of focus on is legislation itself. And this is a comparison between race and religious legislation, if you like. So, for example, if I was to put on my Facebook something that espoused hatred towards someone because of their skin color, I can be prosecuted. If I did the same, if I insulted someone because of their skin color, I can be prosecuted. If I abuse someone because of their skin color, I can be prosecuted. If I use violent and threatening words, of course, and of course if I had intention. But look on the religion side. If I now put something on Facebook and I espouse and promote hatred because of their religion, which is either Islam or Christianity, not Judaism, because Jews are covered under race, or Sikhs actually, because they're covered under race as well, I can get away with it. If I insult people because of their religion, if I abuse them, I can, even if I write violent and threatening words, I can get away with it. And this disparity in the legislation is a very big issue. Because this is really what's allowing a lot of it to kind of flourish the way it is. And that's something that we're very keen. I mean, we've been working with, some of you might remember that in 2006 the Labour government did try to bring in the religious incitement legislation on par with race. But it got watered down because a lot of the comedians led by Mr. Bean, what's his name, Rowan Atkinson, they argued that, if you have this legislation, we won't be able to take the mickey out of Islam, which isn't true. There's one thing taking the mickey out of something, and there's another thing which is inciting violence and things like that, and I'll come on to that. But this is something that, if you've got the elections coming up in several months, we'd be really happy if you guys, asked your politicians if they want your vote, okay, what they're going to do to deal with all hate crimes the same. We're not asking for a special favour. What we're saying is homophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, all of it, deal with it with the same legislation. Why have separate legislation for Islam and Muslims? But here's some examples. So this is actually a UKIP councillor. He goes, hang them all first and then ask questions later. And this is on the back of this picture, which is a pig with a chef's hat, and there's a Muslim on a Spitfire with the Quran being used as firewood. So, yeah, it's insulting and everything else, but what about the phrase, hang them all first and ask questions later? Is that not a threatening sentence? But nothing could be done to him. You all know who this guy is, and some of you might have seen the Secret Agent documentary about the BNP. where he was telling his followers that, you know, don't use racist language or anything else. You know, use religion, use the Quran. That's the way to do it because you can get away with it. And even in his trial, he made the point: Islam is a religion. Muslims are not a race. That's why I can say what I can say. And he got away with it. But perhaps this is one of the most startling ones. Tell me what I'm doing when I read this, when I write this. Instead of turning Ground Zero into a mosque, why not turn some mosques into Ground Zero? What am I asking you to do? What is it I'm asking? I'm inciting you to violence. I am inciting you to violence. Now, if I change the word mosque to perhaps synagogue, would I get away with it?
No.
And this is the kind of issue that we need to kind of look at. And all of this stuff on social media is getting worse. If I can take questions later, unless it's really urgent.
Yeah,
It is urgent.
it is, sorry.
Go on then.
Why nothing can be done about that?
Because of the legislation.
The legislation, I'm French, so I don't know the legislation. But is it really blocking the possibility to see, for the judge to see that there is an incitation of violence?
No, but he can say that because he's talking about. Let me explain to you. I'll come to it. Okay. So the key issue here is that on social media in particular, these kind of messages are rampant, and some of you will see it, and some of you have perhaps taken the time to actually complain to the police. But the major reason why there is this disparity, the only time you can get prosecuted for religious incitement is if you intended to incite religious hatred. So when I wrote that phrase, you know, instead of building mosques on Ground Zero, let's turn some mosques into Ground Zero. If my intention was to incite religious hatred, then you can prosecute me. How are you going to prove my intention?
Well, normally in this kind of legislation, I mean, in France, you have the one who say that kind of statement has to prove that
His innocence.
Is unalive.
Yeah. Well, in this country, it's the other way around. Not for everyone, but most people, and some of you will understand what I mean by that, Schedule 7s and things like that. But the major issue is that there is this disparity in the legislation, and the major argument against putting those legislations on par is that, you know, it will restrict or constrain the freedom of speech of, you know, people to take the mickey out of religion and everything else, which is not true. Because what we're trying to deal with here are incitement to actual crime and criminality. We're not talking about, you know, I've not put something about, I've not even said anything about the mickey taking of Muslims. Do that all day, all night, it doesn't matter. That's not the problem. The problem is when you're inciting people to kind of see Muslims in a particular way, which then leads to discrimination. You know, if someone can't get a job because they've got a beard or they wear a hijab, then that's a problem. And the reason all of this can get, people can create that reality, that normality, especially in social media, is because the legislation offers no protection. But to be honest, saying all of that stuff, the real issue is ourselves as Muslims. I think we're the biggest issue. And in terms of how we dealt with this kind of phenomena, especially in the media, we've been really lackluster. Some of us will remember there was organisations set up years ago to deal with Islamophobia, the Runnymede Trust, when all of that was happening. I was still around then, okay, so that's how old I am. But where has it really got? For 25, 30 years we've been talking about Islamophobia, yet we do not have a central government policy to deal with Islamophobia after 30 years. And we still get sound bites. We're still getting sound bites. We're still happy with, you know, an NGO recording Islamophobia, getting funding and everything else. That solves nothing. Why is the police not recording? They record anti-Semitism. Why don't they record Islamophobia? So as a community, we've not really approached this in a strategic way. But just to say, that doesn't mean that as a community we've not done anything. We have, mashallah, as a community, and this is just from the Charity Commission, we know there's more mosques than 355. But you know, we have built institutions, and some of those institutions are fantastic, and some perhaps not. But we have built those institutions, and as a community, we're the biggest charity givers. Okay, so there is a lot of positivity in the Muslim community from that point of view. But we might have given a lot of charity, but how did we, for example, allow someone, and he's just got reappointed, Sir William Shawcross, who used to be a director of the Henry Jackson Society and has the view Islam is one of the greatest, most terrifying problems of our future, become the chair of the Charity Commission? How is it that we allow something like that to happen without even flinching or raising any concerns? Some of you might have read a recent report by Claystone about Muslim charities that are under investigation, 55 of them. So, though we're doing, mashallah, great work, when it comes to political kind of thinking and media kind of thinking, we are very, very far behind. And if you look at in our parliament, we've got 8 Muslims MPs. Really, if you look at our population, the figures and everything else, we should have at least 32. Do you guys know any of these media personalities? Shout out the names. I just wanted to hear, because Mehdi's been the first. I've done this presentation. Sonia asked me how many times. I've done it about 30 to 50 times now. I don't even know how many times. And everyone is Mehdi Hassan. Ragema Agil, yeah? Anyone else? Samira, yeah?
Azad Ali.
Yeah, Assad, yeah?
Is that on
But,
no. The Scottish
no.
It's the Scottish solicitor.
That's a different.
That doesn't show the same.
So the point of that slide is really in the media, we don't have Muslims that are in the media. Tell me if it's just me. When Mehdi Hassan's on Question Time, you're not a little bit excited. Finally, someone's going to tell them from our point of view. You kind of feel, you're talking there. But why is it that we're so dependent on just one person? How many of us here actually? And Hannah, don't put your hand up. But how many of you here are journalists or are interested in media? Okay, and that's not bad. 2 weeks ago, I was in a room full of 300 people, and one person put their hand up. And that's the reality. We're not looking at journalism seriously. Yes, the money is rubbish. The working hours are all over the place. It is a struggle, right? Or jihad, as some people would say. But it's a serious thing. As Muslims, we'd like to think ourselves as messengers, because we have to give dawah of Islam, etc., etc. Well, journalists, that's what they are. They're messengers. But that's an area we've not invested in at all.
The media are controlled by some powerful people,
They are.
Filters
They are.
to get there. You don't get there just like that.
No, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you don't try, if your mindset is, media is controlled by certain people, I'm not going to get anywhere, then you've lost already before you start.
No, you have to create your own media.
No, sorry. We'll go into the question and answer afterwards. The point being here is there is very little interest in the media, and when it comes to politics, there's even more apathy. How many people actually? If I ask in the last election, how many of you actually voted? Impressive. I am impressed. But most places, it's about 20-30% of people actually bother to vote. But in Burnley, this is a while back in 2002, 4 votes. By 4 votes, the British National Party got a councillor. And on a local level, every vote actually really does matter. But we have this apathy. But when it comes to politics, perhaps that's the only politics we think as well, and we get put off. So these are 2 areas that I want to kind of look at. How can we improve ourselves in both of those areas? So we kind of come on to what we say are cures. The first thing to say is, if I said Muslims are the most emotional people in the world, how many of you would disagree with me? Put your hand up. Exactly. One person. Okay, 2. We are the most emotional people in the world. There are no people in this world, religiously based, that has more emotion than we do. Okay, you see how much money we give in charity. Last year on Islam Channel, there was for Palestine over £1 million raised. £1 million was raised. So emotionally we're very charged, and mashallah, that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. But intellectually, and doing things intellectually, that's where we're challenged. Being strategic about things, we are. And I'm not saying you are, I'm saying I am, right? But let's be honest about it. Okay, something goes wrong, they paint a picture of the Prophet ﷺ in a derogatory manner. What do? We go outside, break our cars, break our shops, burn our... Whose shops are we burning? It's our own shops. Right? So this is usually the response. So what we're trying to do at MEND, we're trying to have a more intellectual kind of approach to this, a more intelligent approach to this, a more kind of strategic approach to this. And the first one to that is actually knowledge. The first thing is we have to have that knowledge. And I just want to kind of ask you guys to visit our website on a regular basis, because we don't put the news articles on our website. What we do is we actually analyze the news articles, we critique it, we find out, you know, where the issues are, and, you know, provide evidence of the Islamophobia that is permeating through those kind of articles. And you look, Russell Brand has kind of endorsed us. I don't know if that's a good thing in this audience or not, but some people will think it is. And in your pack, we've put a simple media toolkit, 3 steps to kind of challenging the media. One of the things a lot of us do is we see a very negative story, but we don't really know what to do. We share it amongst our friends on social media, but we don't really know how to kind of put in a complaint. For example, if you write to the BBC chapter and verse about something and don't put the word complaint in somewhere, they don't treat it as a complaint. You know, and for example, do you remember Islam, the Untold Story? That was on Channel 4 a year or so ago. So a lot of Muslims got offended by it. So, Tom Holland documentary. A lot of Muslims got offended by it because it was kind of, you know, all usual kind of attack. Yeah. And what did they do? 1,000 of them complained to Channel 4. Channel 4 is not the body to complain. The body to complain was Ofcom. Only 300 people complained to Ofcom. And it's just simple things like that. When you see a newspaper article, if you don't quote which article, the editor's code, you know, which code is broken, they're not going to take it seriously. So this is a very simple toolkit that we've created, and we think it will be really, really useful. And it does work. You know, if you look at the laptop there, West Bank attack on UK diplomats, sounds like the Palestinians did something, but actually, after ourselves and other people complained, the BBC did correct it in a matter of hours, to be honest, to Israeli settlers, which is more accurate. But time and time again, these kind of things are happening. And it's conditioning, as I showed you earlier, it's conditioning the population. And we have to kind of be alert to it and at least do our little bit. I don't have your email address. And you know, if you can, go to our website and sign up to our mailing list. We're not going to bombard you with just emails all the time. But every now and again, there are going to be opportunities for us to do something. And I'm going to come on to that on the next slide. And we'd like you to do something. It's very simple steps. You know, it's one thing we all complaining and commending and all of that kind of stuff, but we have to have the right institutions, right tool. What we've been doing as an organisation, you know, the Leveson inquiry, the phone hacking inquiry, some of you know about it. So we participated in that, we submitted, we actually gave evidence to Lord Leveson, and he's included some of our key recommendations in his final report. And the main one I want to kind of highlight is the third-party complaints. At the moment, for example, did any of you read the story in the Mail about a Canadian, I think it was a Canadian teacher, woman teacher, who had an inappropriate relationship with a student? Now, the Daily Mail headlined that story, Muslim teacher, yeah? Muslim female teacher. In America, and Canada, where the story was happening, they never mentioned the word Muslim, because it had nothing to do with the incident. So we complained, this is just to give you an example, we complained, the PCC, or what is called now IPSO, they wrote back to us saying, no, you can't complain, it's not about you, it's about that lady, and unless she gives you permission, you can't do anything about it. And this has been their get out of jail card all along. And what we're saying is, when the Mail and other newspapers write about Muslims, they don't write about an individual Muslim, they write about all of us. Okay? And that's the problem. So if we can't complain, how is that fair? So that's one of the recommendations that's come through. So the Royal Charter, some of you might have heard, it is law now, but it hasn't been executed fully. As you can understand, the media is very powerful. It's still lobbying, it's saying to parliamentarians that, you know, we've changed. So it used to be called the Press Complaints Commission, now it's called IPSO. You know what changed? Just the name. Yeah? If you complained, some of you might have complained, when you were at the PCC, if you complained, you get an email from someone called Simon Yip. Ipso, who gives you the email? Simon Yip. Nothing has changed. They're still in the same building. Okay, so they just changed the name. But they're trying to convince parliamentarians that they've changed and they're more independent. They're not independent at all. And this is something that I'm going to ask you guys, you know, when you look to vote, when you get that knock on your door from politicians, ask them, are you going to implement the Royal Charter properly, or are you going to let the press get away with it again? And you know, some of you who've been following the stories would know how much nastiness the press has been. But in terms of building that intellectual capital in the community, what we want to kind of do is we offer these free training courses. It's not going to be a course on how to speak in the media or how to write a fantastic press release. It's about actually understanding the media. You know your point earlier, who actually owns the media? It is 80% of the media is owned by 5 people. Who are those 5 people? What's their political leanings? What's their social leanings? You know, where are they coming from an ideological point of view? If we understand all of that, it makes sense. But more importantly, if we understand how it's regulated and then how we can challenge, then we can make a difference. So this course we offer like as a full-day masterclass or a half-day workshop, and something that, you know, I hope you guys will think about coming on board. So remember earlier I was talking about evidence-based approach. So from 2012, what we've been doing is we've been visiting. Some of you might be aware that the way the police used to be governed before was through a police authority. When the Conservatives came into power, they said we're going to replace that with an elected commissioner, police and crime commissioner. Okay, so those elections took place in 2012. We wrote to every single one of them and the prospective ones, and we've been following it up with visits and everything, and saying, will you report Islamophobia? If you report Islamophobia, we'll promote you in the community, etc., etc. You know, whatever it takes. And alhamdulillah, to date, we've got 10 police forces now that are reporting Islamophobia. So that's one part of the job done. We want to get the numbers up to something like 16 to 18. We don't need all 42 police forces to do it. We just need about 16. Why? Because that gives us the sample data that we need. And all of those ones we're targeting are in key Muslim areas.
You haven't got Scotland on the map?
No, we haven't got Scotland on the map, and I'll come to that in a bit. We're a very small organisation, and I'll come to that in a bit. But the point being, that's the first step, that we will now have data that's not going to be disputed. The circular argument that we've been having with politicians and other people about Islamophobia will stop, inshallah. But the second bit is missing. The second bit is what? In Luton, there was only 4 incidents in 8 months. So we lobbied Bedfordshire Police for like 1.5 years. They started recording it, and then in 6 months or 8 months, they only got 4 reports. So this is the second part. We have to report every single incident. There'll be many times we'll be thinking, okay, what's the point of reporting it? It's not going to make any difference. No, but let me give you a real life story from a police officer in Merseyside. A Muslim sister, she walks down the street to her house on a regular basis. She gets picked on by a group of boys. It starts off as verbal abuse, spitting, and it kind of gets aggressive sometimes, so they throw stones at her and everything else. She kind of left it for a few weeks, but then said, okay, you know what, I'm going to report it to the police. And she reported to her local neighbourhood police officer for a month. And then he thought, you know what, let me just go and investigate this, see what's going on. Why are these kids picking on her? He went to their house, the kid's house. You know what he found? He found petrol bombs. They made petrol bombs because the next stage they were going to was going to arson her house. Now imagine what got avoided because she reported a simple spitting incident, a simple abusive incident. That's one thing. Second thing is, it helps to formulate the evidence base for people like us, so we can say to central government, wait a minute, you've got all these policies on the back of 300 incidents in this form of hate crime. There's been 3,000 attacks against the Muslims, and you haven't got a policy. Doesn't make sense to us. And we need that. It's very, very important. But also from a local perspective, you know, the police intelligence. So the police would know, okay, which areas are crime hotspots is important. So every single incident, even if it's spitting, you know, we shouldn't have the mindset, if I report to the police, it's going to get solved, someone's going to get arrested and prosecuted. No. The reason you're reporting to the police is so that it gets taken seriously. So inshallah, you know, if you're across the country, is anyone here from Thames Valley actually? No, okay. Excellent, because Thames Valley is one of the police forces said no to us, and you know what argument they used? Well, if we record it for you, we have to record it for the Hindus, we have to record it for the Sikhs, we have to record it for the Jews, etc., etc. The most lamest argument. If Hindus and Sikhs and everyone else were being picked on, of course you need to do that. Okay? And second of all, how did you become a police crime commissioner not knowing that Jews and Sikhs are covered by race anyway? But you know, this is the kind of... but because we're doing it nationally, it's difficult for us. But you as a local constituent, if you were to write to the police crime commissioner, it'd be more powerful because you've got a vote. And they'll take it more seriously. And this is the kind of local activism that we want to kind of work towards. And we've got an exhibition which some of you might have seen. It's a 23-panel exhibition, really big exhibition, just really highlighting how we as Muslims are portrayed as the other. You know, the meta-narrative about Muslims is we're the other. You know, extremism, everything, all of that kind of stuff is a sub-heading. The overarching narrative is that Muslims, they're the other. They just don't belong here. You know, this isn't our country. And that's the rhetoric that is. But you know, the end of that panel, it has like about 15 Muslims from different walks of life. Like, how many of us know that Muslims are farmers in this country? You know, there are Muslim farmers in this country. You know, we're just normal. We're not special, we're just normal. Okay? And that's really powerful. So if there's places that you know where a lot of non-Muslims will be around, this is a free exhibition that you can take. And inshallah, the literature for the exhibition is in your pack. Have a look at that. And then it comes to the election period. This is another campaign that we do, and Get Out and Vote. Website is coming live soon, inshallah, to encourage registration, but also to encourage Muslims to vote intelligently. And we're going to publish the key manifestos. We've done surveys across the country asking Muslims what are the key issues, and we'll be publishing that. And I'll list that in a minute. But I want to show you this slide. You know, as a community, we do have some power. It's just we don't know how to use it. If you look at the Conservatives, they're targeting 80 key seats, you know, what they call marginals. Out of those 80 key seats, 45 of those seats, Muslims actually have the 100% swing, meaning they can turn around the previous year's result if they all voted collectively for one candidate. And for Labour, out of their 106 target seats, 41 of those seats, Muslims had 100% swing. So if Muslims would kind of worked on a more strategic level, and by strategic I mean on things like equalising hate crime legislation, yeah, things that really matter. You know, one of the things that really matters to us as Muslims is Human Rights Act. That's under threat. If you look at all the challenges that's happened against the bad legislation that's come out of some of the counter-terrorism legislation from 2000 onwards, you've got all defeated through the Human Rights Act, not through anything else. But that's under threat as well. So these are key things that matter to us, but why would we disagree? We know traditionally the disunity in the Muslim community, but if you operate on that level, where would the disunity come? So we have to move away from personalised politics to actually politics that improve not our lives, but the lives of our fellow citizens. And we kind of have a masterclass for that as well. So we're not going to teach how you become a fantastic MP, but we will teach you how the politics works in this country. A lot of people don't actually know how it works, how actually a bill comes to power, and what are the times when you can lobby. You know, one of the bills that's going through Parliament now is what? Counter-terrorism bill. Yeah. So a lot of us actually we don't really know what's going on with the counter-terrorism bill. Why is it so bad? I don't know why it's so bad. Why? Because some Muslims are saying so bad. It must be bad. So that's one level of where we are. Okay. The second level is okay. So it's really bad. What do I do? What am I going to do? Okay. You know what? I'm going to go and talk to my MP. Why? Because I've got an action alert to tell me to go and talk to my MP. So I go to my MP and say, don't support the counter-terrorism legislation. It's really bad. Well, why is it bad? Don't you think we should stop terrorists? So you know, so we're not equipped to understand how to challenge and how to kind of get things. But more importantly, when the MP talks to us like that, and they won't actually at this period because the election is only a few months away, we've got to be equipped to answer them properly as well. But if I ask a question, and straw polls again, I love them. How many of you actually know who your MP is? Put your hand up. Keep your hands up. How many of you have visited your MP? How many of you are on first name basis with your MP? MashaAllah, one person. Right. There's hope, right? Because you know what we've got? We've got numbers. There's millions of us here. So if we get one every time I go somewhere, it will improve, okay? But do you see where we are? If you go to other communities, when they've got all of these issues, they're engaged on these levels. You know, they know their MPs, they visit their MPs on a regular basis. They say, you know, these are the problems, what are you going to do about it? You know, I voted you in, you're in Parliament, how are you dealing with this issue? So this is, because we don't really understand how the political system works, we're not engaged in it fully. And lobbying, you know, so that some people have an aversion to politics. Fine, but politics isn't just about, you know, being an MP or a councillor. Lobbying is very political. And that's one of the things that, you know, we as a community, we need to master very quickly. We need to know, how do we lobby? How do we get what we want? Or how do we stop what we don't like? Yeah, whatever those things may be. So this is something else that I hope you'll be encouraged to come. And for us, in the next 10 years, these are the things that we want to kind of focus on. The Royal Charter being number one, because, you know, unless we have proper regulation, we're for free speech, before anyone misquotes me, yeah? Not against freedom of speech, freedom of expression, whatever the newspapers want to do. What we want is responsibility. What we want is a body similar to Ofcom, yeah? Ofcom has teeth, okay? You do something wrong when you're broadcasting radio or on television, you can get shut down, and people have been shut down. But the press is regulated by its own editors. Yeah? IPSO is made up of the editors of the press itself. That's not independent. So what we're looking for is a similar body, and that it comes through the Royal Charter. But then that equalisation of race and religious hatred law I was talking about. Police forces, you know, they need to make it their standard thing to record Islamophobia, and as you can see, a few more other things there, like extradition treaty. Okay, why is it one-way traffic? Why are we giving all our citizens to America without asking any questions? Yet we want an American citizen. We have to prove our case in court. You know, why is that? And we have to kind of expand our needs just beyond Muslim specific, if you like. And to add to that, you know, we don't want to kind of approach things, like I said, emotionally. We actually do on a regular basis briefing papers for politicians, but also we do consultations, but we also write our own reports on various things that are happening. So, you know, do visit our website and have a look. And we are politically active, so the last party conferences we were at, both the Labour and Tory ones, where we actually talked about equalising the legislation. And surprise, surprise, only the Labour Party was a little bit positive about this. Unfortunately, the Tories weren't. So all of this kind of stuff comes to, okay, what is it that you're going to do? I've mentioned about the media, so the intelligence, the toolkit, the action alert, reporting it, get out and vote. There is actually a standing order form in your pack. We are 100% funded by Muslims. We don't take any government money whatsoever. If you can fill it in today, it'd be fantastic. If you think you're going to go home and fill it in, think again, because usually it doesn't happen. Whatever you can give, £5, £10 a month goes a long way. But what I really want to focus on is what we call working groups. And what we've kind of developed this strategy is that everywhere we go locally, we just want to involve all of that. And we kind of have three key areas: core knowledge about those two areas, politics and media. And then, you know, really building those local alliances. What we call local alliances are journalists, politicians, and your kind of institutions like the police crime commissioners, your local councils. Key stakeholders from our point of view are the civil society movers and shakers. So that includes mosques, okay? That includes non-Muslim organizations as well. And the key thing, what we don't do as a community is we don't track our success. We don't see, you know what, we did this for a year, did it work? If not, let's can it, let's do something else. You know, we need to become professional more in that way. And I want to kind of invite you to the next working group meeting, which is going to take place in SOAS on Wednesday the 18th of Feb. If you can, put that in your diary. If you can come, please do. And you'll see there's already a good number of people that we have there, inshallah. And you know, you see how we're progressing with this. what we want to do is kind of work ourselves out of a job, essentially. That's where we're going. And the next two planned training courses are Saturday, 28th of March for media and 29th of March for politics. Right, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I will take all your questions now, inshallah.
Do you do anything at European level?
We cooperate on a European level with Iman.
With who?
Iman. Good. You're going to ask me what that stands for. It's a collective of organisations that is working on Islamophobia, making sure that there is a common understanding of the phenomena, and that there's coordination with various organisations like the police forces and government, and also lobbying in Brussels itself.
Okay, so at this point in the evening, I do expect absolute strife, everyone to ask their questions. Do put your hands up. I think everyone has a question. So can I start over?
Yeah, so I've got two very quick ones. First one is Police Scotland is a single police force, and I know you've got resource issues, but I would have thought in terms of coverage, that would have been a very big quick win. And the other one is about, you've said report crimes to the police forces directly, but what about third-party Muslim organisations as well, such as MSF and Tel Mama? And I just had a sub-question there, which is what's the difference between those two organisations?
Three questions then, okay.
Related.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want one by one or?
I think what we'll do is we'll take a couple and then we will come back.
Yeah.
So, do you want to say your questions on?
Any forecasts, like 5-year, 10-year forecasts on if we carry on the way we are in terms of our political participation, etc., where things will go, what will happen?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer those?
Yeah. Okay, so the main reason we're not in Scotland, it is resources. Because what we have to do, the way it works is we have to visit the Police Crime Commissioner, we have to visit the Police Constabulary, we have to create local contacts, then we have to upskill them. It's just the physical distance is too much. And when I say we, it's actually me. I'm the one that's travelling around the country. But inshallah, we've got really good contacts with people in Scotland already. And politically, they're also very inclined towards this. So it's a quick win.
They're a progressive government.
Yeah, very, very progressive. So it is something, and also Wales is something. So this year, those are the two areas that we're going to focus on, inshallah. In terms
Are you
of...
yourself from Scotland?
No, I'm just saying that I'm
Okay.
aware that Police Scotland is a single force.
That's right, yeah.
Therefore, all these little county forces here,
Yeah.
you get a quick win.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, if you do know anyone from Scotland?
Yeah, I mean, we will do that. And in terms of why do we encourage, look, when a crime happens, you don't think of MSF, right? And if you do, then there's a problem. That means we're not included in society. When a crime happens, we think of the police. That's who deals with it, okay? So always report everything to the police. The benefit, the reason strategically we don't agree with, because MSF doesn't collect data in that sense. We don't agree with NGOs doing it at this moment. It's not because we don't like the NGOs, it's because strategically it's a bad move. Let me explain how. In 2010, the Labour Party, when they were in power, what they said is, yes, you know what, we're going to write to all police forces and we're going to say, you know what, you have to record Islamophobia, like all the others. But then the government changed and that plan kind of went out of the water, yeah? What did the incumbent government do? Did they honour that thing? No. What they said is, you know what, we'll give someone money and you go and record Islamophobia. So this organisation did. And what happened to its stats? It got ripped apart by everyone. And it gets dismissed. So there you go, another 2, 3, 4 years of circular argument. What's the evidence, Azad? You say Islamophobia is bad, what's the evidence? So, we have to understand that we're being played as a community. We need the information to come from a body that is not going to be disputed. I'm not saying the police is perfect, there's going to be lots of problems there. And no one's going to turn around and say the police make up figures. Okay, it's just not going to be the case. So that's the first thing. After that, if there are NGOs doing it, that's where the benefit is. That's when they actually really add benefit. They can say, and that's what the CST does, the Jewish equivalent. So what they do is they look at what the police has recorded and then look at their own data and say, oh, did you guys pick this up? Why not? And that's a benefit. But as a community, we're not there. because the police force is underfunded. Yeah. So that's the reason. In terms of forecasts, I think, alhamdulillah, there's more people that are active now. I think the forecast is good, but it's not going to be fantastic for at least another 10 years. In the sense that I don't think the vibes we're getting from politicians is we're not going to equalise the legislation anytime soon. And the reason is there is this whole issue about freedom of speech, freedom of expression and everything else. And we've just not been able to articulate our point of view properly and neutralise the people that are working against us. And a lot of those people are doing it out of ignorance. It's not because they hate Muslims and hate Islam, no. It's just that they believe what they read in the mail. And why? Because the politician also repeats what's written in the mail as well. So what we have to do as a community is we have to change that narrative. And a good example is the narrative on Palestine, right? If you look at 10 years ago, the narrative on Palestine was, if you were a Palestinian supporter, you were almost like a terrorist. That's how everyone would make you feel. But now, if you're a Palestinian supporter, it's cool actually. Yeah, and it's changed. It didn't happen overnight. It's because people, day in, day out, they worked and they challenged the narrative. So we as Muslims, we need to challenge the narrative on that we're not against freedom of speech. Every time someone thinks of a Muslim, you've got 27% of young people who think we're violent, that Islam is a violent religion. So we've got to change these narratives on a regular basis, and then, inshallah, that improvement will happen.
Okay, let's take some more questions. One over here, and then thank you.
Hi, yeah, sorry. It's something that wasn't really covered in your presentation, just until one of the bullet points at the end about your future, what you're looking to do. Given what we've been saying about the importance of young people, what would your top recommendations be for the youth who are facing Islamophobia in an education setting, so like in schools or in universities? So what are your recommendations or key things you think they should be doing to tackle that?
Brilliant, thank you.
Sorry, thank you for your very good presentation and thank you for all what you're doing actually, it's great. It's really good that you're trying to raise political awareness in the Muslim community, but my question is, obviously there is some political apathy, but is that different to other communities? So I think we seem to be slightly harsh in our criticism of ourselves, in the sense that yes, maybe Jewish community is better, way better than us in this, but we are probably most of us are second generation or third generation. I mean, the minority would be third generation. Lots of people have come from economical immigrant kind of background. So these people, societies evolve. What are we gauging against? What are we gauging against this evolution of the society? Are we really behind, or are we actually doing well?
Good question.
Do you want to take that one
Should we
first?
take the other one? Yeah, take one.
Okay,
No, just
Rodrigo.
wondering, thank you for your excellent presentation. Are you going to distribute the stats somewhere? Can we see the stats anywhere?
The police
that would be
ones.
really good. All of them,
All of them.
from your presentation. Yeah, I'd really like to see them somewhere if that's possible. I'm going to email you or something like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is what the sister you said about ourselves being, our Muslim community being a bit backward in terms of political engagement and media engagement. I think that is right, and we need to brush up fast and make some changes and learn actually from our cousins. For example, who I hear almost give to every MP or to a lot of MPs free interns. A lot of free interns are Jewish and they influence, they get in there, they get their foot in that way. Where are the Muslim interns? And same in the media. You get into the media by being an intern initially and work your way up. And we need a lot more people to do that.
Yeah, okay. I think for education, it's funny because we were just I was talking with a couple of sisters earlier who produce books, children's books, they kind of write. And the major problem has been there's a big disconnect from, if I consider myself an old man, between me and my children, there is a big disconnect. Whether I like it or not, I can speak their language, I can be hip like them, I can even understand their music, all of that kind of stuff is not an issue. But there is always a big disconnect, and that's natural. But unfortunately, in terms of dealing with issues, that big disconnect has led us to have two different approaches. So, as mature people, if you like, as mature Muslims, we're challenging Islamophobia in a particular way. But youngsters, they're challenging it in a different way, and it's always going to be that way. So their approach will be far more emotional, because that's what young people are, emotional, okay, more confrontational, all of that kind of stuff. So what we've done is we've forgotten that that's a reality, that's a norm. For young people, that's a norm, and we've abandoned them. And by that, I mean we've taken away all the spaces where they can discuss and debate all of these issues. So if you look at universities where they were supposed to have all of this freedom, we as a Muslim community, we've kind of allowed all of the ostracizing that's taking place of universities, of speakers, of that freedom, of that platform. And the single most important thing we can do for youngsters is actually give them that room to express themselves and not get criminalized for that expression. That's the single best thing we can do. In terms of actually education, we've got a campaign called Islamophobia Awareness Month that we do with other organizations. I think it's about 3 years old now. So last year we piloted what we call lesson plans and school packs. It was actually created by one of the teaching unions, NASUWT. And so we kind of took feedback from that. We piloted it in, where did we pilot it? In Leeds and Bradford, Humberside, basically. And we got a lot of positive feedback about that. So what we want to do is expand that for this year. So if people are in the education sector, do contact us, and we can do with your expertise. So what we're going to try to do, inshallah, is similar to how Black History Month and other things are kind of understood and taught as a normal thing in schools. We're trying to build the syllabuses and skill levels to do that as well. Hope that kind of covers most of it. Yeah. The question about apathy is different. Yeah and no. Some of us are apathetic like anyone else. Those politicians, they're all the same. There's the cheats, the this and that and everything else. It's true. But, as a community, or as another community, you wouldn't say they have an issue with their citizenship. By that, I know so many Muslims, especially young, who have an issue with their citizenship. By that I mean they're not comfortable if this environment, if Britain, is theirs. They don't think it's theirs sometimes. They don't almost feel that they belong here. That lack of confidence in citizenship is what's causing a lot of the apathy, and that's problematic. I mean, if there was 3 words that will sum up everything we're trying to do, it's these 3 words: active Muslim citizen. That's what we want. Your Islam, you should be proud of it and not worry about it. But why are you not equal to that on your citizenship? Why is your citizenship lacking? And the activeness needs to come to make the change. And I don't think we're being hard on ourselves as a community. I think if we are being hard, then maybe we're wording it wrong. But a lot of Muslims, they don't feel that they belong. A lot of Muslims, they don't feel that it's their duty and their right to actually have a say. If you look at the same-sex marriage bill that took place, okay, obviously from an Islamic point of view, homosexuality is problematic from a religious perspective. But you still can have an opinion, I don't agree with this bill. What's wrong if I disagreed with that bill? Why were so many Muslims scared to say that publicly? Because you'd be called a homophobe. Because of that conditioning that I just mentioned that's taking place. Every time a Muslim utters something, there's got to be something wrong. So that's made them feel more inferior. So that as citizens, they can't even express something that they disagree with or agree with, whichever the case may be. So that's what we're trying to say, that I don't think we're being too harsh on ourselves. I think what we're doing is trying to get at least a good number of Muslims active in that kind of stuff. But if you look at, as mentioned about media, I get, like this morning I got about 5 calls from 7 o'clock in the morning about what? Boris Johnson and jihadis and porn and all of that kind of stuff. And you know, I actually stopped doing television interviews because I'm just a bit busy. Do you know anyone? Can you suggest someone? And I struggle. Who can I send to Sky? Tell me. It's just very few people. There's only 8 people's names I give to journalists because I trust these people and you know they've done the training and everything else. But wouldn't it be fantastic if I had 100 that I can just list through all across the country? That's what you know. That's the level of engagement that we need to do. Same thing as politically. You know, you mentioned about interns. If I said to you, you know what, there's this MP that's looking for an intern, how many of you would actually be interested in doing that? We wouldn't. There's one. Excellent. Yeah, we know. Yeah, okay, fair enough. You're really politically active, but you know, because we don't see any benefit in that. What's the benefit of me slaving over for some MP? But you know, the understanding, the inside knowledge and understanding that we'll get, we don't see that, and that's the lack of education, and that's also breeding a lot of apathy.
How?
Yeah, and how power is influenced.
It's lobbying.
Yeah, essentially, that's exactly what it is.
So just on that, in terms of citizenship, who in here is likely to vote in the general election? Raise your hands.
Ooh.
I would have thought
Got
everyone
more
would
to
be.
convince.
Okay. All right, let's take another round of questions. Olivia?
Just first, just one point and then a question. There's been a couple of mentions of internships. Just going back to that sister's point about the economic context of the community, there's a strong link between the ability to be an intern and your family's wealth, basically. That's a quick point. And the question is, do you, in terms of recording anti-Muslim attacks, do you do any work with measuring anti-Muslim activity, that organisation?
Tell Mama.
That's the one, yeah. That was the question.
Okay, any questions?
You briefly touched upon this in your talk earlier, but could you just talk a little bit more about the counterterrorism and security bill and what some of the implications for that may be? Because you so briefly mentioned some free speech in universities, and I know a lot of universities are very actively fighting against it, but if you could just kind of express on that.
Okay, and your question there?
I have to say that I'm actually surprised with the description of Britain and Muslim in Britain you gave. From my perspective and my observation of what's going on in Britain, you are actually a very strong community, despite the fact that you are only 5%. We in France are 10%. And we are facing a lot of Islamophobic acts and violence and so on. One reason why I think Britain is a really good example is just by seeing how, in the news actually, they have managed to discuss the issue of Charlie Hebdo in a pretty fair way. We had some really good articles in The Guardian explaining really what was going on, the dilemmas about freedom of speech and so on. And I don't know if, as an organization, how you engage with these opportunities that we are given, where we have these small victories. So really, like the way Charlie Hebdo has been dealt in UK is an opportunity for you, I think, to show that actually as a community you are part of Britain and that you share the same concern than the average Britishman. The issue of freedom of speech is important for everyone. And the issue of radicalization of some Muslims as well.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what were your thoughts about it?
Okay, sure. Go on. You might as well take those as well.
I had a question, but that as well I was going to answer, which is, that's actually a really good sign of our success. So you pushing people into the media, that was a sign of, in the media we do actually have, to your point earlier, we have Muslim producers, we have Muslim-friendly producers, we have a lot of left-wing bedfellows who want to say, actually, this is not a fair representation of Islam, and it's a really good success story to show actually how we were able to mobilise that. And we tried it in France as well. The difficulty in France is that, who are the producers who are going to say, yeah, let's talk to you? Like, the people we had in France responding to Charlie Hebdo, they were talking to the BBC here and the BBC as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is a good success, and this I think hopefully will lead to more and show how that works. So my question was, what form does your lobby take? What does it do? So that was
I mean, just on your point, you're coming from France and you're seeing it's better. That's good. And that's how it should be, in the sense that, because we look at France and we're scared, right? You know, and we look at Germany and we get petrified. And other places like Greece, if you look at, alhamdulillah, Greece is now turned back a little bit more. But if you look at what the Golden Dawn Party did, so in Europe, it is a little bit worse, definitely, but it's still not good enough. And that's my point. Yes, we are a little bit better than maybe the situation in France, but that little bit better isn't good enough, and we need to improve our game. I don't want to kind of give the impression of fear-mongering. I'm not, my glass has always been half full. That's the kind of guy I am, okay? But, it's very easy to become lethargic and just, yeah, it's okay, and bury our heads in the sand. That's what has happened. It's only, the first mosque open day was probably about 15, 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, and mosques in this country have been here for 60 years. So only about 20 years ago, we opened our door to non-Muslims, come in and have a look at our masjid. Okay, so we are very far behind. Even now, many imams in masajids, they can't speak English properly. So we've got a long way to go. We're nowhere in a comfortable place. That's where I'm coming from on this. And in terms of encouraging positivity in media, yes, a lot of those people that are writing in places like Huffington Post and SIF and creating their own blogs are people that we know. And we've also developed a new course we're going to launch inshallah soon called Citizen Video Journalism, where on your iPhone, and that's why I have an iPhone, okay, you can do everything from record, edit, the whole shebang. You can be a journalist yourself. An incident happens, get your iPhone out, put it on your tripod, record what's happening. So we want to kind of encourage more of that kind of stuff. So this is something that we're kind of working on and that we would do. In terms of, do we work with Tell Mama? No, we don't really work with Tell Mama, if that's okay. Who asked that question? Yeah, if that's okay. In terms of the CT bill.
Why not?
There isn't really they're focused on recording Islamophobic incidents. That's not our focus. We're not into recording Islamophobic incidents. What we're into is getting the police to do that. So, we've been on same kind of platforms and everything else before, but there's no common ground to work on in that sense.
So they also want to legislate Islamophobia as a crime.
They are pushing. They are pushing that. But though that wasn't initially what they started off with. So this is a latest edition, recently, if you like. On the counter-terrorism bill, those of you who are aware, I think if I just focus on one element of it, there's a section that is on prevent, and you mentioned about universities. How many of you actually heard of the counter-terrorism policy called prevent? Okay, that's good. At least a lot of you have heard of it. Do you think, positive or negative?
Negative.
Negative, mainly. Now imagine that being made a statutory duty. That, at the moment, doctors voluntarily report patients to the police. Psychologists, psychiatrists, teachers, all of these people on a voluntary basis now report people. They don't have to. If they don't, it's fine. But when it becomes a statutory duty, if you're a doctor and you don't report something, you can lose your job. What kind of society is that going to create? I go to the doctors for medical treatment, and I want to be open and frank. Maybe I'm getting loopy in my head, and I want to tell my doctor. But then, if I'm thinking, oh wait a minute, if I tell the doctor, and he's going to tell MI5, and he's going to tell the police and everything else, it's going to destroy our society. But this is exactly what's happening. And the fact that this can be debated in Parliament, the fact that there's politicians who think it's a good idea, shows really how bad our society has got. Shows how powerful the fear-mongering industry has become. That we're not going to let the terrorists defeat us. Yes, we are, because we're going to give away all our liberties. And it's a sorry state. We should, as a community, be in the lead. Why? Because it affects us first. When Section 44 was kind of implemented, it's about 6-7 years ago, when we used to do the work with MSF, the number of calls we used to get from Muslims about how they just used to get stopped just for no apparent reason, and the police didn't need a reason. You know when it changed? When it changed was when it affected journalists. You know, photographers especially. Why are you taking a picture here? They were getting, you know, it was when it affected the non-Muslims, then it kind of, the legislation, it got taken to the European Court. That's when Liberty took it up. And we know a lot of the proposals in Prevent is going to affect us first, but then it's going to affect the non-Muslim community as well. But where is our alliances with them for them to see that actually this is a really bad idea? Where is that conversation that we're having? So we've all heard about Prevent, but we're not really doing anything about it. And that's not to say we don't want to challenge terrorism. You know, that's not to say that. And that's not, and it's also to say, let's have an honest conversation about it. You know, the reason, and if you look at every single terrorist that did something stupid, what did they say? Because you're in Iraq, because you're in Pakistan, because you're in Afghanistan, foreign policy. Okay, we're not naive enough to know and not understand that our government needs a foreign policy for economic purposes. We know that. But we also expect our government to say to us, yeah, that's going to bring a bit of blowback. But we're not going to scapegoat you as a community for it. That's all we want. Fairness and all of this kind of stuff. And that mature discussion. But that ability is being taken away day in, day out. In all honesty, the CT bill is probably going to pass anyway. There's not really much, because there was hardly any resistance in Parliament. But as you know, these are things that that matter to you. You all know about it, but I bet none of you actually spoke to any politicians about it. I bet none of you are speaking to teachers about it, because your son, daughter's teachers are going to report 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and I was on the first channel pilot scheme, back in 2004. It's scary. A room full of all the professionals in that local borough with a case X and with their name and everything else, they said this in the playground. And then you have the police, you have the security services, you have the doctors, you have the social workers, everyone deciding, what should we do with this person? That's where we're going as a society. Unbelievable.
So the question was around what form does lobbying take?
Who asked that question? What form does our lobbying take? That's a secret, isn't it? There's probably, I would say, how would I describe it? I mean, we lobby at almost every level now. So we don't have a parliamentary officer, but that's something that we're, inshallah, raising funds for. So we want a full-time presence in Parliament. But we've got very good links now with three major political parties. At senior level as well as ministerial level. So they know who we are, what we're coming about and everything else that's there. With journalists, we have similar kind of thing. Actually, with journalists, we've got a lot more take-up now than previously. On a community level, the empowerment that we're kind of working with a lot of Muslim community, that's taken a lot of shape. So in Manchester, for example, last year in Manchester, this is hilarious, they did the National Hate Crime Week. They had massive banners and everything else. We're dealing with hate crime and everything else, and not a single word mentioned about Islamophobia. Not a single word. Not in any of their literature, publication, pages and pages. And we were like shocked. And the Police Crime Commissioner, Tony Lloyd there, is actually a really friendly guy. He's very supportive of us. He didn't know, and we said to him, you've got this 30-page document about hate crime week and you don't even mention Islamophobia. He goes, that's not true. And he went for it and he couldn't believe it. So this year, so they started early, they've taken the local, we don't want them to take us, we want them to take the local Muslims there and make sure that Islamophobia is also dealt with. So we kind of permeate all of the kind of different levels. But we want to move away from us doing the work, if you like. We don't mind showing the ropes initially, but then that's the idea behind the working groups. That then you guys, you just take it and do it yourself.
Okay, I think just because of time we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Azad. In terms of, I think what was interesting about the comment on what happened in France is that immediately after there was this massive demand for Muslim apologies, and I think we need to be more proactive so we're not actually having to apologise. we've seen that Muslims are the most generous when it comes to giving in charities, and I think this comes from also a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that if one part of the body aches, then all of it aches. And so this is something that we all need to get engaged with. I think with any kind of bigotry, anti-Muslim sentiment, it's not based on a rational response, but actually it is emotional. But Muslims themselves, we need to be rational in our response. Okay, so can we have a round of applause for Azad? So just to finish off, a couple of announcements. There is no City Circle event next week, but we will be back in a vengeance on the 13th of February, the day before Valentine's, talking about what has love got to do with it. So please do join us for that. And just also another shout out for those of you who haven't seen Dara at the National Theatre, please do go see it. It's amazing. I went to see it this week, and there is a promotional offer for tickets that are usually £34, can be gotten for £15 using the code DARA15. So do book yourselves on for that. Thank you very much once again to our audience for attending today. Good night and have a safe journey.